Hi everyone, welcome to another episode of Richmond Solution. Today we are going to be talking about a very interesting topic that probably all of you are familiar with. And for that, I have invited a special guest right from our office in Oxford. Let me introduce you to David Colpowney.
Richmond Solution podcast.
David is one of our editors in our office in Oxford. David, how are you?
I'm very good, thank you, Nico. How are you doing?
Doing well. It's a bit cold down here, and I'm envious because I see you're wearing short sleeves.
Yes, we're getting into the spring in England here. As you said, I'm in the office in Oxford, and it's a quiet Friday afternoon. The sun is shining, and all is well with the world.
That's fantastic. So, David, before we start, why don't we tell our audience a little bit about you? How long have you been involved in the field of ELT, and how did you become an editor?
Okay, well, I've been involved with ELT for a long time. I lived in Spain for a while, and I taught English there. And after quite a few years teaching experience, I moved into publishing, and I moved to the UK with my wife, who's Spanish as well, and taught me all my Spanish about 10 years ago, and I've been working at Richmond since then.
Oh, wow. Fantastic. So I'm sure you are familiar with what it's like to teach English to Spanish speakers then.
Yeah, absolutely. I've done almost all of my teaching experience has been with Spanish teachers, so I'm very used to that language, and also I've been on the other side because as I've learned Spanish, I've sort of picked up things from Spanish speakers, which has been very useful.
And that's why we really wanted to invite you today, because I know that you have been working on some projects in the company. We will talk about that later on, that have to do with this idea of the bilingual, the bicultural probably, but we will talk about that. Because the idea today is to talk about CLIL, and CLIL is one of these approaches that is very popular in education, in the teaching of English nowadays. But I wanted to ask you what CLIL is specifically. What would you say if you had to answer the question?
Well, as you say, it's very popular in education at the moment, and it's a very broad term. CLIL stands for Content and Language Integrated Teaching. But again, what does that mean? Well, you've got a content part, which is a subject or part of a subject, which could be geography, history, science, business studies, tourism, any particular topic. And it's integrated with language, which means that the teaching of that subject is taught in a language which is not your first language. If I was to study the history of art in Italian, for example, that would be a CLIL subject for me. It's a subject which is taught in a language which is not my first language.
Mm-hmm. And one of the things that we also have in CLIL is that it's language, as you said, it's content, and it's also the thinking skills, right, that are important. So that you're working with different levels of thinking as you're dealing with the content and the language, right?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, any subject, every subject blends into another subject. There's no one distinct subject. There's bits of, if you take geography, for example, there's bits of chemistry in there, there's bits of biology there, there's bits of sociology. And by teaching something in another language, it just helps you sort of make those connections between different subjects and different languages, and sort of really opens up your mind to how the world really is. Because Nothing's
Yeah.
really enclosed as one particular topic.
I second that comment really, because we were so used to box content in different things, like, okay, so this is biology and this is chemistry, as if they wouldn't interact. And actually, you can study history, the history of science, or the history of geography, or whatever, or the science of geography. I mean, all the subjects, as you were saying, really can interplay. And language, of course, as we always say, is
Exactly.
a vehicle that.
Yeah, I mean, you can't teach, in a way, I mean, it makes sense. I mean, you can't teach a subject without using a language, and you can't teach a language without using a subject to talk about. So it's a great way to sort of make connections and see the world how it really is.
Mm-hmm. Now, David, one of the things I wanted to ask you is, because why has CLIL become so popular over the years worldwide, if it was designed for Finnish education? Because to my understanding, it was the Finnish that made CLIL such a buzzword, I think.
Yeah, I mean, I think you're right. I think CLIL, the term, started off in Finland in Finnish education, but I think the idea of teaching a subject in another language has been around for a lot longer than that, for ages. I mean, to take an example, people used to think, or maybe they still do think in some places, that the best cooking in the world is in France, and lots of chefs would go to Paris to learn to cook because they thought it was the best. And of course, they go to these fancy restaurants, and the head chef only talks in French. So these chefs learn how to cook, but by the end of their training, they were also fluent in French. So that's an example of something that's been going on for ages. I think in Finland, I think I'm sure you know, they invest a lot in education, and lots of sort of league tables about education. Finland often comes out, very high. And I think that comes from a while ago. They sort of traditionally had a kind of agricultural economy, and they were kind of turning it into a kind of technology-focused economy. And they wanted the population to speak other languages, because not many people speak Finnish apart from the Finns. So that was English, but also other languages. And because they've got this big focus on education, they've developed a lot of methodology around CLIL, and used this methodology to keep people educated, and also learning the other language. And it obviously had a lot of success. And fast forward a few years to the European Union, you've got all these countries that speak different languages trying to work together. And one of the goals in terms of education in the European Union is that all children, I think, study 2 languages, sort of to improve that communication. And so they started using CLIL as a way of improving language in the classroom. And I think, people have seen that, and it's spread around the world, and that's the situation we've got today.
And so CLIL, to my understanding, and if I remember well, I think it became a buzzword by the end of the noughties, more or less, right? Like 2008, 2009. If I recall well, the first books, at least the methodology books that I started reading, were published 2008, 2009, etc. And it has really become a buzzword in the field of ELT. Like, CLIL this, CLIL that, and you're an editor. I mean, the CLIL page, or the CLIL spread, or the CLIL material. How does CLIL differ from a traditional ELT course then?
Okay. Well, I think that the most obvious kind of difference, if you look at some CLIL material and compare it with a traditional ELT course, is that the syllabus of a traditional ELT course, if you compare two books, then especially at the lower levels, they're very often going to have quite a similar structure. They start off teaching what they consider is the sort of simplest structure with the verb to be, then the present simple, and sort of working up. And the content that's taught in a traditional reality course is based around the languages, whereas in CLIL it's the opposite. It's the content which is driving the language being taught. So to take an example, something like the first conditional, where you have like a structure with if I do this, X will happen. You might not cover that until you sort of intermediate level in a traditional ELT course, because there's a bit of a present tense, there's a bit of a future tense, there's an if structure. It seems a bit complicated. But if you're teaching science at quite a low level and you want kids to make predictions, to make hypotheses, they need that language, and they'll be looking for it. And this gives them the perfect context to use it, which is the beauty of CLIL, really. It's a really authentic context that gives students a reason to use the language right in that moment. It's not like a kind of ELT situation where you learn something because you're going to use it when you're at the train station in the future or who knows when.
Yeah.
Those an activity and you need to use language now.
Yeah, like the made up situations that could probably happen to you, but we don't know. But
yes,
just
exactly.
in case, practice this. I mean, I know we are not teaching the cat is under the table or the cat is this and that anymore. But you're right. I mean, sometimes we create these situations that aren't always very likely to happen in the student's life. Whereas, from what I understand, based on what you're saying, with CLIL, we are giving students the possibility of facing something that could be more authentic, something that could be more realistic to their immediate life or what they can see, probably, even if they're studying science. Now, you mentioned some, but which would you say are the main benefits that CLIL offers to students and teachers?
Well, I would say, going back to what we were saying about this really authentic context, I think that's great for both teachers and students. It feels very real, it's very motivating. So the students are interested and engaged, so it's much easier to teach a lesson from the teacher's point of view. I think it builds confidence as well in a lot of students. You might have students that aren't typically good at languages, but they might have a real interest in this topic, and they're going to want to express themselves. So they've got a real reason to use that language. As I said, we were talking earlier, it kind of develops skills and lets sort of students see connections between different subjects. And also it's a good way of preparing students for the future. They might study a topic in another language at university. They might be working with people in the future in context related to this topic in another language. So it's a great sort of life experience as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And I was thinking, probably it has happened to you as a teacher as well, especially when we are starting the profession. We hear about this new methodology or something like this or like that, and we get a bit nervous, like, okay, how do I do this? Or teach me better about how to do it. Like, we know it doesn't exist, but we really want the recipe for doing it, right? So I was wondering, what is necessary to start cleaning a lesson, like, or to start cleaning a course? How can school start cleaning the instruction if the teachers aren't really CLIL experts yet? I mean, which would be your tips or piece of advice?
Okay. Well, I mean, I think in an ideal world, a teacher that is a subject teacher and also a language teacher would be perfect, but that's not
very difficult to find.
So very often it will be the language teacher who's giving these classes. But I think you've got to remember that these language teachers have been teaching content all the time. If you're teaching stuff about the weather, then that's teaching geography. If you're teaching the past tense, you might bring in a bit of history. So I think a language teacher's got nothing to be afraid of. I think one of the good things to do if a school is starting to use CLIL is to get the language teachers and subject teachers communicating and collaborating. So that you can choose the topics that are going to work well, some things which need to be reviewed, maybe some topics that students are already familiar with, so that when they start the CLIL lesson, they can start relying on that knowledge they've already got, and now start making those connections between the languages straight away. So that would be a good way. Another way to do it is, just try it out a little bit. You don't need to suddenly start teaching a subject 100% in another language. You can. There's lots of really good examples of CLIL where they actually rotate the subject, so students get exposure to both languages in a subject. Or you can try out doing one little topic or trying a project. Just a taster to see how it goes.
Something you said I think was crucially important for our audience. I'm also really into bilingual education, and as we know, there are these two traditional models, right? The additional or the subtractional model of bilingualism, and many schools sometimes go for the subtractional, like, okay, well, I will teach history in the foreign language, and then I will remove it from the curriculum in the mother tongue. And that just, I don't advise it, because sometimes if the student doesn't like English, but the student liked history, then you're killing the opportunities for that student. So sometimes it's good the additional model, in which you have it in the L1, but you also offer it in the L2 as an opportunity. Of course, the ideal is the dual language program, so that is not always easy to find. But something that you said, I think, was very important, and it is that if you cannot start with a whole course in one subject, at least to have some sort of flavor of it, okay?
Exactly.
With a little bit of science. And on that line, I know that you have been helping us a lot in-house in terms of this idea of CLIL, and we have some surprises that are coming up for our users, and I would like you to tell the audience what you have been working on, because I don't want to reveal the name yet. What a little bit of suspense here. So what is it that you have been working on?
Okay, well, as coincidence would have it, we've been working on a product which would be perfect for schools who are interested in dipping their toe into the CLIL waters and trying it out. It's a product called CLIL Projects, which uses the idea of CLIL, and in this case, it's a product for primary, and the subject, the content part, is some topics related to social science and natural science. And this idea is combined with project-based learning, which is a fantastic combination, because students work together in small groups and they do lots of practical activities and experiments related to this topic. And so it's a fantastic way of really working together and seeing what they're learning about, what it really means practically. And one of the reasons that we've gone down this route is that a lot of studies into project-based learning show that it can be really beneficial to develop 21st century skills, because students have to work together, they have to collaborate, they have to think creatively. Communication is essential. And one of the big things that the PBL does is encourages students to become independent learners. And that's really what we're focusing on this product. Each project has a special website which is full of loads of fantastic content related to the topic, lots of audio visual material that students can get used to researching and finding out what they need to do these activities in class. So it develops all these skills, it improves language, and also it's a great way of reviewing the content topics and also maybe going into a bit more detail. So it really strengthens the content side of things as well. So yeah, we're very excited about this product.
So let me see if I got all the points right. You came up, or you were working with a team on a product that is very flexible from what I can see, because there are different projects and the school can choose the projects. They are different topics, right?
Yeah, one of the things is that different schools in different countries will be covering different parts of the curriculum at different times. So what we've done is break down this product into just 3 kind of levels, you could say. So we've called them primary investigator, primary explorer, and primary innovator, which is the top level.
Nice.
And so, yeah, teachers can choose a topic which fits in with what they're doing at that particular time. So, yeah, in that way, it's very flexible. And also, in terms of how the content side of things is picked up by students, is also very flexible. You could have a traditional approach where the teacher uses the interactive whiteboard and shows all the resources on the screen to students. You could have a collaborative approach in class where kids are working together with their tablets, researching stuff, or you could have a kind of, especially for teachers, short of time, you could go for a kind of flipped classroom approach where students are at home having a look at the content, doing some interactive activities, and getting the knowledge, and then in the class they're doing the practical activities in their groups and putting that knowledge that they've got into practice. And I think a mixture of all 3 of those is the way to go, and it will make a very dynamic, interesting class, and I think students will get a lot out of it.
I'm excited already. I feel like I want to be back in the classroom.
Yeah, come on,
because I mean, it's cool to have something that can be content related. You said natural science, social studies, that gives me the flexibility, that offers me the possibility of integrating new methodologies without lots of extra work from me as a teacher, that it gives me the possibility of working in the traditional way with paper and everything, but I also have a website and I can integrate and I can develop some digital literacy to my students. Now, when can our teachers start using this? Have you finished with this?
We're not finished, unfortunately, but we are going to be launching a few titles very shortly. So potentially, teachers could start using it, and it would be great if people start having a look at the product, getting interested. But we will have a full launch at the start of 2023. But as I said, we're going to have a few titles launching very shortly. It would be great to see what the markets think about that.
That's wonderful. So to all our teachers there, you can start contacting your local rep, asking for these amazing little projects to start looking at them. As David was saying, some few titles will be available already 2023. That would be the time when everything will be ready. I'm personally looking forward to seeing them, and I'm very sure that all teachers in Latin America and the world will be fascinated with this. David, thank you so very much for your time today and for sharing your knowledge with us. And thank you for being so kind as always and for joining us in our Richmond podcast series.
It's been a pleasure, Nico. Great to see you again. And anytime.
Likewise, and you enjoy the sunlight there. I will stay here inside the house with my cold weather. And to all of you out there, have a great time, and we'll see you. We'll hear each other in our next episode. Goodbye.